Welcome to the Insight Labs. This is a very exciting portion of Client Summit, and it's exciting because it is a lot of information in bite-sized chunks, and you get to get up and walk in between. And you can grab coffee while you're walking. So it's very, very carefully planned. Today, in this Insight Lab, we're going to be talking about merchandising with a strategic mindset, talking about some partners and channels that many of our clients are asking about, but not very many of them, a good number, but not all of them are actually leaning into yet and taking advantage of the opportunity. So I'm Jeremy Hull.
I'm David Hutchinson.
And let's start by reiterating one of the key statements that we've been making throughout this entire summit is that customers control the journey. They're more in control than ever before with how they interact with brands, with how they research brands, and there are a lot of new entry points. And so because of that, an ecosystem where brands used to have a lot more control of the conversation, that has seeded and that has become much more complex as the user journey has become more complex. So for retail in particular, there are three main places that customers are going to research, to compare, and ultimately to buy. Direct to your owned and operated properties. All right, everyone likes that, right? Thumbs up. We like that because you can control the journey, you can control the messaging, you can cookie them, you can track them, you can remessage them, you can kind of keep them in that conversation and upsell and really own everything. But there's a lot of other places where customers are going to consume information. Resellers, trusted partners, and then marketplaces, which is a combination of trusted partners, self-serve, and the wild, wild west. When you think about exactly what these are, direct, that's pretty obvious. That is your .com, that is your social media pages. That is where you control the conversation and basically are able to make sure the right story gets across and the right products are featured. Resellers, these are trusted partners. This is your Target, your Best Buy, your Walmart, your CVS, etc., where you're working with them to move your product, but your product is also being featured alongside competitors' products. And you don't have complete control over the conversation. You can control how your product appears, but you can't completely control it at the level of granularity. Historically, you haven't been able to control it at the level of granularity you do in other digital channels. And then marketplaces such as Amazon and eBay, where brands are playing, but also individual resellers are playing, and also, not to use too many scare tactics, there may be some less scrupulous people posing as brands and representing you in ways that you don't really want to be represented. So if customers are moving between all of these areas, it's really critical that our marketing strategies are moving with them and we're taking advantage, not just focusing completely on direct, but also looking at these other points in the ecosystem and optimizing to them. And for a while, that just wasn't possible. At least it wasn't possible to do at the granular level of control that we had with other channels. But now, we can. So the majority of your digital channels historically have been focused on driving traffic to your owned and operated sites, your properties. And that's, again, that's fantastic. It's a good strategy. You should not lean out of that. However, with the introduction of our new service line, paid platform merchandising, we're able to buy and optimize ad space on resellers and marketplaces, similar to how we've historically bought search. We've been doing this for a little while, and it is Brittany might get mad at me for saying this, but I think as of last year, it's our fastest growing service line at iProspect. Something finally trumps social. And what's exciting about it is I feel like we've just at the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that we can do here. So the way to think about this channel is as a specialist practice of optimizing paid search marketing across resellers and marketplaces. It's very, very similar to paid search, but it is a specialist practice, which is why we have built a specialist team around it. We learned the hard way many years ago that if you just take paid search people and throw them at these new platforms and partners, you're not going to get the best results because while they're similar to paid search and while user behavior is similar to paid search, the actual nuances of optimizing them are a little bit different than traditional paid search, keywords, match types, targeting, etc. A good way to think about it is if traditional search marketing is the digital window of display, where people are glancing, they're browsing, they're looking at what they want to do without really committing to walking in the door yet, then paid platform merchandising is the digital shelf. And so a lot of the things that you've been doing with your partners historically, such as figuring out end cap deals, right? Figuring out, if you're Coca-Cola, what you're going to spell out with your boxes at the end of the aisle, or even just placing your product at eye level versus putting it way above reach or down below reach. All of those are strategies that have been used in traditional retail, in-store retail for a long time. And that's the sort of thing we can now do in the digital space for all of these partners using paid platform merchandising.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. So paid platform merchandising is no longer an option. When we think of that expectation economy that we've been discussing these past couple of days, and the fact that consumers are in far more control than ever before, and they don't take that linear conversion journey, the linear purchase funnel that would make our lives a lot easier. We need to understand that consumers are going everywhere and bypassing the old traditions of search engines. Forrester called out in their recent search marketing trends that Amazon is now a significant player in search. That's because consumers can go onto a product detail page on any retailer and be served with really rich information. They've got pack shots of every angle, every size and color. They've got product descriptions with dimensions that I didn't even know existed. And crucially, they've got user-generated content giving an unbiased view of that product. In fact, if you take away the Amazon buy box, what you're left with is the world's largest the world's largest social network. And the online sales are also huge. Amazon alone last year in the US generated 64 billion. But I see we've got our partners Criteo and sponsors, thank you Criteo, in the room. Their product, Criteo sponsored products, it places inventory across all the other main retailers in the US. And actually, if you total their online sales, that potential prize is even larger. So we know consumers are going to these places. We know that the potential is huge. What should be PPMs, or paid, we've just rebranded, excuse me. Paid platform merchandising. I'm going to call it PPM from now on. So what is PPM's main role in this? Well, essentially, it's to be at top of shelf and mind for all online shopping outside of the brand's owned properties. So we have desire by consumers. We have a great channel with huge potential. Today, we wanted to take you through a few pitfalls, 4 main pitfalls to be exact, and how we think you can navigate those. The first is the fact that it is an emerging channel with rebranding happening every day, as I just mentioned earlier. And as a result, if we wanted to give an analogy, it's often compared to paid search 15 years ago and social 3 years ago. I was around 15 years ago in paid search. I've got the gray hairs to prove it. And actually, I remember for the first time ever, 15 years ago, we could track from click to conversion. That was mind-blowing. Now with PPM, we can track in real time online data, and those that even remember 5 years ago remember how hard that was. So plenty of growth and opportunity, but it is very manual. The UIs have just launched. They haven't had 15 years to develop, and the technology, the complementary technology, like bid management systems and offline efficiency tools are not quite there yet. So there's a lot of manual creation that happens not only with ads and keywords, but as Jeremy mentioned, with SKUs and a good knowledge of inventory that we have, etc. There's also very limited platform insights out of these UIs.
So there's some quality of life stuff that if you're a traditional paid search marketer and you go into these platforms, stuff that you just assume is going to be there that just hasn't been built yet because they are new platforms. And this isn't the platforms being disingenuous. They're just new. They're building it out. The first time I logged into, here I am, I'm going to throw Amazon under the bus again, and I'll do that instead of you, David. When I first logged into Amazon AMS, their search solution, one of the things I was looking at some of our accounts and I wanted to see what the trending was. And I was like, okay, let me look at year-over-year data. And the data only goes back 30 days in the UI, which I thought was astounding. It surprised me, and that's, again, why this is a specialist practice. Now, to Amazon's credit, they have heard our feedback and others. They've gone in, they've made changes. You can now view 90 days. So it is an emerging system, and again, that's why we need this specialist practice, because that way the people that are laser focused on the system understand the nuances and can come up with solutions to work around them.
Great, we've got for those that remember, a groaning analogy here in the fact that our teams are specialists in nature. They live and breathe retail. They're qualified with the likes of Criteo and Amazon. They're driven not only to understand keywords and ad text, but that inventory and skew what is available and what needs promoting. And crucially, we realize that the overall industry has not built the technology that we need to get maximum impact. So we've started to build proprietary tech that we'll give a couple of examples of later on. The second pitfall that is one that we help to navigate is misaligned KPIs. In this example of a case study that is not iProspect's, we have a great set of statistics that if this was your own brand site, you would be proud of. 113% year-on-year ad attributed sales increase. The key here is ad attributed. And if you're not aware and if you're not living and breathing this specialist practice, what you might not understand, for instance, is depending on your setup, if you're promoting this PC and someone clicks on that PC ad, but in fact purchases a keyboard, that sale is attributed to the campaign. So while that's great for the brand, that's probably not what you wanted out of your campaign. You probably wanted to upsell or cross-sell this particular PC.
But David, even if these metrics are questionable, ROAS, that's a great metric. What's wrong with that?
Well, I'm glad you set me up in a really cheesy way. Thank you. In PPM, ROAS is not a good measurement of success. And the reason we believe it's not is while it's great as an everyday conversion optimizer, so ROAS is great to benchmark against other competitors or to see generally if your ROAS is improving, things are going well for you. But ultimately, it can't be that KPI because the world of PPM and retailers are so complicated. The negotiations you do with one retailer and the margins that you give away will be completely different to another. And then you've got the cost of drop shipping and things like that. So if you compare a ROAS performance of a Walmart versus an Amazon versus your own brand site in terms of pure ROAS, you aren't going to get a true representation of your performance. Instead, we would recommend looking at these four main pillars of success. The first is reach. If you have a new product or you just want to grow awareness, then we would look at placements on homepage or category, and we would look at impressions and product detail page views. If you wanted to grow your category share, you were already established within category, then we would benchmark how big your category share is before activation of campaigns, during and after. Defense is crucial and one often overlooked. Jeremy alluded to it earlier, but you have to, in the world of retail, it is the wild, wild west. There isn't these, you can't bid on our trademark terms, etc. If that product's good and the reviews say that, consumers will click on it and buy it. So the retailers do not care about your brand space. And what's worse is you will get people that come along with a few products that they might have bought somewhere else, and through the power of marketplaces, they might then promote them as your own brands. So defense is crucial to have in place. And of course, we all want to grow sales. We're not suggesting forget about sales, but look at ROI rather than ROAS. The third pitfall is confusing conversion data. What we mean here is when you're looking at a Walmart versus an Amazon versus your own site, you can often be comparing apples to oranges. What we mean by that is if we take the three main publishers we work with, so we've got Criteo here.
The artist formerly known as HookLogic.
There we go. We've got Google, who have rebranded themselves to Google sponsored products. And we, of course, have Amazon Marketing Services, or AMS. Criteo and Google, for instance, give you a post-click conversion window as standard of 30 days, AMS 14. Criteo gives you an extra layer of insights of post-view conversion as well. These two publishers, for instance, don't give you any incrementality studies. Criteo does. So we're not saying any of these are necessarily wrong metrics, but because it's a new industry, there isn't the IAB out there to standardize those metrics. So it's up to iProspect to solve for that. And we solve for that by bringing in APIs pulling in the data, all the data, but making sure that our reports are showing apples for apples comparisons. We also overlay that with other proprietary tools like scraping tools that we will cover in a couple of slides. So bringing those same metrics, looking at those same performance with the same performance lens allows you to do that iteration of planning in a far more standardized way. So I talked about that share of voice and scraping. This is a screenshot of I don't know who named it, but kudos to them, of one of our scraping tools called Mothra. And Mothra, in this example, is actually pulling in certain ASINs or SKUs, Amazon calls them ASINs, certain SKUs on Amazon, looking at keywords and where those SKUs are ranking, both for brands, for competitors, and also crucially for resellers. And at the left pie shows the organic position, and these two show two other placements within AMS, sponsored products and headline search ads. And unlike paid search, when you promote something through PPM, you are creating eyeballs directly on the product detail pages and boosting that organic rank. So what you would expect to see through a campaign is your organic ranking of the products you care about rise. And as a result, we can therefore decrease our investment in those particular products and invest in new ones. This kind of overview allows us to see when we're decreasing or increasing and allows us to dial up and dial down our investments accordingly. When you take this data, you can then bubble it up into a far wider and holistic view where you segment your data into values that you care about. So this could be, for instance, for Levi's, where it will show across all retailers what your product share is and your average rank on page. The last challenge, pitfall, is the hardest one to solve for, and it's not going to be solved for overnight, but it is a challenge. Essentially, what is happening with a lot of relationships is the wholesale sale teams are having discussions with retailers and committing PPM budgets upfront for the year. So you're committing straight away, say 10,000, with a channel that is working on auctions. So you're not committing an inventory or a tenancy. You're committing your money before you're seeing performance. Would you do that in the world of paid search? Would you commit and sign off a year's worth of budgets to Google, and not, irrespective of the performance of Bing? Probably not. So, but yet we're seeing that happen a lot in PPM. So what we would strongly suggest is think of optimizing media to drive sales, not as a line item on a partnership agreement. Controversial, but true. Once you've got those pillars in place and you're aware of the lens of attribution, etc., we would then suggest that you start to look further ahead. And those two further ahead things that we want to point out is it's not a set and forget campaign when you launch in PPM. The first thing is those competitors are coming in and out all the time. They might only have 5 stock, but they don't have to have minimum investments to appear on Amazon, for instance. So they could be in and out before you know it. So you've got to constantly keep an eye on the new challenges to your brand in that space. Inventory, if we're doing a good job, as I mentioned, we should be succeeding in promoting organically those products, so it makes sense to keep on swapping out the ASINs or SKUs. And of course, budgets between publishers. Please follow moving that budget to where you're seeing the best impact. The next one we want you to think about is offline sales impact. This, I don't know how Amazon did this, and it's rare that they publish statistics like this, but they feel that people researching on Amazon actually has an 85% offline sales impact to other retailers, which is huge. While we can't prove or deny this statistic, with the power of M1, it's not just a media activation platform, but it's a media insights platform as well. And using that credit card data, we can see what people are buying in which store when. So lastly, we wanted to give you a case study that we feel of a brand that we think is doing a great success within this space, and they've had to. Intel, as you heard yesterday, is an ingredient brand. The ROAS of a laptop doesn't matter to them. The ROI does. They're also a category leader. So it doesn't matter that they dominate the category. What they care about is upselling and cross-selling high performance, high profit laptops. So over the years, they've moved away from the ROAS and are looking far more at these metrics of share of wallets, of units sold, of page coverage across the retailers.
So, ultimately, the things to take away, the things to remember here, retail is not just about that final purchase commitment. It's about making sure your brand has a voice in these spaces where consumers are looking for information, they're looking to research, to compare, to buy. And you can just trust and hope that you're going to show up well there based on your existing agreements, or you can be proactive, manage your listings, and optimize them just like any other performance channel. It's also critical to make sure you're looking at the macro view of PPM and how it fits into everything else, and using the right yardstick to measure. Again, David talked earlier about how if you just pull a report from each of these platforms, just go in and grab a report and compare performance, you're not comparing the same thing because each of them are measuring differently. And that's not because any platform is trying to hide anything, that's just because it's a new space and there's not a standardization. And so as you're optimizing, it's critical to understand where those different slices of the data are, be able to normalize for them, be able to truly see what the performance of each platform is, so you can have that flexibility of budget. And then finally, if you don't remember anything else, it's that in this space, ROAS is not a core KPI. It should be an optimization lever because ROAS does not take into account those margin implications and all the other cost things that come into play when you're selling outside of your owned and operated properties. And if any of you are just sitting there leaning back going, I'm not in retail, I don't have to worry about this sort of thing, I would remind you of what Perna said this morning, is that people learn behaviors. She was talking about how people have learned to take pictures because they have it there. People are learning that they can comparison, that they can research, that they can do things in this way. And so as other industries move in that direction, finance, pharma, insurance, there are going to be more and more marketplaces where you can go in and you can compare. They're going to emerge first as just aggregators, but then they're going to become marketing opportunities. It's the same sort of thing that happened in travel several years ago with the likes of Orbitz, Travelocity, those companies that are aggregating all the information. And all of a sudden, you can't just count on your site to drive the conversation because your consumer has more resources than ever before to research and understand. All right, any questions?
I have two questions. The first is, within this program, is there any opportunity, probably not what I have to ask, any opportunity to drive users from these sites back to your own direct site?
So there is with the programmatic side of things. So not within this channel specifically, but within the Amazon ecosystem you can do that.
So just using their data and then being out on the exchanges?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And then the second question is, have you heard Amazon explain why they're doing a 14-day click look back instead of a 30-day like the others?
I have not, no. And that's a great point. We do need to work better as an agency to get all the main players in the same room and discuss this and make sure that it's clearly called out.
I would say though, before we even have those conversations, what we would want to do is engage further with you and establish what those standards could be. Because one of the great things about this being, just like David talked about, like the early days of paid search where things are emerging and things are being created, these standards and best practices are still being defined, and we're jointly defining them between ourselves, our clients, and our partners. And so before we go and beat up our partners and say you have to change this and I won't talk to you till you do, let's make sure we know what we're actually wanting them to change it to and jointly build that standardization. One of the great things about the partnerships with Criteo sponsored products and with Amazon is that we truly do have a seat at the table and they're leaned in on the partnership. So as we have requests or as we're working with clients and we have feature, hey, it would be nice if we have this. Like I spent a lot of time earlier complaining about the reporting, but the good news is they are listening, and even if they haven't totally fixed it in the UI, they built the API access so we can slice and dice it and we can change that look back window and we can modify that. It's more of a power user type setting right now though.
I have two questions. I know I worked with HookLogic before on some stuff, but and maybe this is a question for the HookLogic folks in the room, but I know at one point we were talking about stacked bids. Like the Intel example is a great, very relevant for us because both Intel and Microsoft have an interest in selling Surface laptops. And one of the things we talked about was, in cases like that, could we stack bids to compete more aggressively against like an Apple or something like that? I don't know if there's been any movement or progress on that kind of a stack bid.
There certainly are conversations about that. I think we're still under NDA on that at the moment, aren't we? So it is happening. You're absolutely right. It makes perfect sense. You know, we see Google moving far more towards that manufacturer sensor solution, and and Bing as well. So yeah, it's only natural that there is a huge potential to unlock budgets from people like yourself. So that is happening in terms of conversations. It's not launched yet, is it though? Putting you on the spot, Critio.
I mean, I don't know what I'm supposed to say is regarding those clients, but we've done things like that, yes.
I think it's just a matter of, from my perspective, figuring out how much interest there is in that and whether it should be like a custom one-off solution or if it's something that enough brands are interested that they should roll it into the core functionality of the product. And that's something we just need to define together.
Yeah.
And then my second question was about incrementality. Like, I know that's always, you know, we get asked by leadership, these numbers look great, but is it driving incrementality? And I think I've always struggled with showing that. And incrementality can be net new sales, or as you showed there, how much am I defending, you know, against losing against other people? And I don't know what tools you have or how that is measured.
Yeah, I think the best way we're addressing that at the moment is share a page. So giving you that example of how we're moving those organic products through the rankings before, during, and after the campaigns, showing the screenshots, etc., is the best example we have. I know Critio do a pretty good job of proving that incrementality, and you can have a pretty broad stroke and assume that if you're making a change on all the other retailers, you should be doing the same on the Amazon. But agreed, it's something that we keep on asking for as well, is a more scientific way of showing that.
We're able to do it in one-offs right now. I think standardized incrementality reporting is on the horizon. It's just kind of an interesting contest of who's going to get there first.